Hey there, everyone, and welcome back to another one of our quarterly videos where Peter and I take a look at a combination of both the astrology and the tarot for the next season. Hey, Peter, great to see you.
Yes, yeah, nice to be here again. Thank you.
So, we're going to take a look at July, August, and September, which is definitely a very dynamic period astrologically. So, I'm super curious to hear what you are going to bring forward about the tarot. And for new listeners, we tend to go month by month. So, we'll talk about July and then August and then September. So, Peter, do you want to kick us off with what your featured tarot theme or card is for July?
So like you said, I placed kind of one focus on July. I'll explain how I get there. July is the month of the devil card, and I approach that from a numerological perspective. So I just take the digits of the current year, which is 2024, and I add them together. So that's 2 plus 0 plus 2 plus 4, which gives us 8. And then I add the numerological value of the month of July, which is 7. 8 and 7 give us 15. 15 is the card of the devil in the Major Arcana. And the devil is probably the most egocentric card in the entire deck. So I'll talk a little bit about the devil, but I'm going to remind people that our June card was temperance. And I talked about the three faces of temperance, one of which was sort of balance and moderation. And the devil, the July card, is nothing like that. This card is almost a 180-degree turn from balance and moderation. I actually used an analogy in a recent course I'm teaching of the devil as the Cookie Monster from Sesame Street. So, if you're familiar with the show, I mean, I'm a Sesame Street. I grew up learning English on Sesame Street. That the Cookie Monster is a sweet, cuddly, furry monster, but that there's a time when cookies are around that they can't help themselves. They lose their mind and become obsessed on cookies, focused exclusively on cookies. And that is an element that's represented by the devil card. So that I want language. Now, this is the devil card. And of course, in the month of July, the devil doesn't actually play by himself. We are actually in Cancer season for part of July. And the two cards that are associated with that period, which is roughly, Sun 10 degrees Cancer onward, are actually linked to two cards of the Minor Arcana. So this is the Three of Cups and the Four of Cups, which I've talked about before, and I'm going to hold them up here. They're actually cards of celebration. So we've got, cards of joyful celebration. Sorry, joyful celebration with the Three of Cups. We got cards with a little bit more muted celebration here, a little bit more introspection. But they are cards because they sit in that realm of cups, in that realm of emotion. They are cards. It is centered around that, around that celebration energy, around that emotional energy. But both of these cards, they're going to be influenced by that ego card, by that Cookie Monster saying, I want, I want, I want. So I think these cards together, so the 3 and 4 of Cups, and actually be the 2, 3, and 4 of Cups because they sort of make up the 3 Minor Arcana cards associated with Cancer. But we're talking about July. These cards invite joy and love and celebration every single year. But this year, because that 2024 numerological edition brings the devil into play, these cards actually, I'll use the language, they don the cloak of the devil. So they're influenced by the devil card, the excessively good time card, the me card. I've often referred to this card as the sex, drugs, and rock and roll card. They're the things that we need sometimes, but they are definitely things of excess. So this card says, keep your ego in check.
Mm.
It behooves us to remember, too, that the card that precedes the devil was the June card, which is temperance, which is a card of balance and moderation, and says, well, maybe we draw on the lessons that we learned under the influence of the temperance card in June. So I guess if I was finishing off, I'd say, have fun, connect with people, enjoy yourself. But remember that your ego might want to take over here and make it all about you. And you want to make it about you and the people that you're with. So the kind of last statement would be, don't be bound by your ego. If you take a look at the devil, it really is, it can be a card of restriction. The two people represented in here are actually bound by chains to the throne that the devil sits on. Don't be bound by your ego. Don't be bound by your desires. A reminder that you control them and not the other way around. So that's sort of the tarot message for July.
So interesting. So I guess the devil card has a little bit of those themes of obsession in it as
No,
well. Yeah.
yep.
Like
There's
that
no question.
wanting.
Yeah.
And the reason,
Sorry.
obsession. Yeah. So in astrology, July is this month of like extremes where we have a couple of our really classically helpful, supportive, affirming aspects. And we also have one aspect that is quite, I don't even know the best adjective to describe it. Discombobulating, unsettling, chaotic, all of those would work. And so, because I know you mentioned some of those, like the Three of Cups has a little bit of that celebration energy. And I think the best aspect for July probably echoes that, astrologically at least. And that's the Venus sextile Jupiter aspect, which is around July 21st. And this is an aspect of togetherness, of hope. There's a joyful quality. There's sort of this adventurous, fun, expansive, kind of affectionate energy. So it's a lot of those kind of positive things that we would share with others, for sure. But our problematic aspect, which is really the dominant aspect for July, is Mars conjunct Uranus. And this happens around 26 degrees Taurus, right in the middle of the month, July 15. Now, Mars aspects are a little sort of slower moving, so it's probably going to be strongly in effect July 14, 15, and 16. And Mars-Uranus aspects are this mix of sort of this willful rebelliousness, but also this sort of frustration of things not going the way you want or as quickly as you want. And there's almost that, like, it's funny you mentioned the Cookie Monster. I think Mars-Uranus aspects, we can make rash or impulsive decisions because we don't feel that what we want is happening, when we want it or how we want it. So there's a little bit of that like toddler temper tantrum energy in that Mars-Uranus energy. And, if any of you have raised young kids or you've got nieces or nephews, you've been around young kids, sometimes they just can't regulate themselves. They're tired, they're hungry, they've been overstimulated for too long, and they just have that kind of meltdown of, either the impulsiveness or the impetuousness, like, I want it, why can't I have it? Why can't we do it now, mommy or daddy? And so that kind of energy is really strong around the middle of July. And so similar to your point, Peter, if we get stuck in that Mars-Uranus energy, we're going to react from a place of impulsiveness or impetuousness. We might even be a bit reckless. And that might mean we shake things up or we're, pushing things that if we just gave it a few more days might actually kind of sort itself out. It just means we may not get exactly what we want, and we might not get it exactly when we want. I think that Mars-Uranus aspects can really help us clarify what annoys or angers us. And sometimes we don't want to just ignore that or suppress it. We want to acknowledge it, and then we want to use our kind of more mature adult self to figure out, what is that telling me? What is it that I need to know in terms of changes that I might need to make? And then how could I think about that, doing that in a more mature way? So there is definitely this unpredictable, chaotic, unexpected, maybe a little bit of an explosive energy where there might be an outburst or a disagreement that kind of spills over. And that's sort of July 15. So not exactly the same as the devil card, but definitely a more problematic, challenging kind of astrological vibe.
I'm smiling here because I'm going to get into August, but when you talked about Mars, you talked about chaos, you talked about the idea of things crumbling down. You're describing the tarot perspective of August, actually.
Right. Okay.
Which is really interesting. So I was listening to the the language and how it really does tie into the same sort of process, looking at the card for August, which is the Tower card, which is all Mars and all about the idea of things crumbling and chaos. And I kind of feel bad because, we've got the Devil card in July, we've got the Tower card in August, and these are often seen as challenging cards. Now, I always take the view that cards are neutral. The energy that they have might be more challenging, but how we respond to them is important. And um, you know, this card is really, and I'm going to hold it up here because I always think in a visual medium, you can sort of see the chaotic, sudden nature of this card. It is a card that is struck by lightning in a cloudless sky. That the billows of smoke that you see there are a result of the lightning hitting the tower, not clouds that are in the sky. So there is an element of suddenness. There is definitely an element of chaos. And what August represents here is an invitation for us to check the foundations of the things that we really care about and recognize that, a shaky foundation over time is going to crumble. So if the Devil was the path that we took in July, and the Tower is there to tell us that we might have done some damage, which if we leave it unchecked might be irreparable. So some of those foundations might now be shaky. So this is a good time to check in with those things that might ground us. It might be other people, work, personal practices, hobbies, activities, and see if we have caused any damage to those relationships or those routines or those responsibilities. And if we have, then we have to do the repair work that's needed. Otherwise, when we least expect it, which is the chaos, of the Tower card, the foundation on which they're built just might come crashing down. It's also a reminder, though, of the impermanence of even the most important things. So that lightning strike comes all of a sudden and strikes what appeared to be a very solid standing tower. And so that's, that check in and check over is kind of the message for this card of August. But the last thing I'm going to point out, though, is that this is a card that is that corresponds to Mars. So you can expect a bit of heat and you can expect some activity, because the one thing that the Tower card isn't is quiet. So August is not likely to be a quiet month. What about from an astrological
Oh my
perspective?
gosh. I mean, it is tricky because I'm like, so that's July, similar to you. And then August, astrologically, we have this 3-planet pattern forming with Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn. And historically speaking, Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn were our 3 superior planets. And combinations between Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn have a big impact on the collective, but they also point in our own individual lives to more complex choices and more substantive matters and topics coming up for review and probably some restructuring, as if in August, we're being asked to sort of reorganize and reorder the priorities of our lives. And for some of us, this is going to make complete sense because you might be going through a natural milestone. You might be starting a new chapter in a relationship or in your career. You might be waving goodbye to kids as they go off to college or university, and you sort of know that it's time to restructure and reorient. But for others of us, the markers may not be so obvious. And, technically what's happening with astrology is that we have Mars will square Saturn around August the 16th. And then just a couple of days later, on August 19, we have Jupiter square Saturn. And both of these aspects point to the need for adjustment. That's one of my big words, interpretive words for square aspects. A square aspect is like when you come to a T intersection in the car and there's another car that's pulled up at a 90-degree angle to you, and you both cannot go at the same time. And so we find ourselves in August at this point in our lives where 2 things are trying to happen, but we don't have time, energy, money, capacity to do both of those things at the same time. And that's where we get that need for adjustment. It's really about making choices. And anytime we see Saturn so strongly involved, these choices are necessary and they may not feel like the funnest thing. It's like maybe I don't really want to do this, but this isn't ideal either. Or I know I'm dealing with this in my own life where I have to make a choice and I've got two great things that I could do, but they're at competing timelines. So I have to make a decision. I'm either going to do this one thing and not do this, or I'm going to do this thing and I can't do that. So with Saturn in the mix, there are practical realities and practical limits. Like you can't be in two places at once, or your X amount of dollars covers one portion and not two portions. And so that idea of having to make choices, it's a really important part of being a human, but it's the one thing that we struggle with the most. And I would suggest that with Saturn in the mix, because he's really the overarching theme, making these major aspects to Mars and Jupiter in August, think about what is the best long-term option for you. What is either going to allow you to participate in something or invest in something that has a long-term benefit, particularly with the Mars Saturn square in mid-August. This Mars is our short-term planet. He likes immediate results. He wants it now. And Saturn is our planet that is that sort of wise, mature voice of reason, almost a bit like a grandparent or that wise mentor saying to you, you could do that now, but if we extend the timeline a little bit, there are these other factors to consider. And when you take that longer view, your priorities and your sense of what's really important might shift. So there's lots of opportunities to live and choose from a place of wisdom in August, but it might mean having to, say no to some of those more in the now things for those longer rewards. And so it's not quite, again, the tower, but it is that idea that you probably won't be able to have all the things you want on your ideal timeline. So what choices will you make?
Yeah, it's still, though I know you say it's not the tower, but we still have that idea of I don't want to say not pleasant times, but times that require work and might require, like with the tower, that idea of checking into foundations. It's not the stuff that we necessarily want to do,
Yes.
but it's the stuff that we have to do. It's almost that maintenance kind of that maintenance vibe.
Oh, yeah. I mean, and for sure, I don't understand the tower as much as you, Peter, because I probably think like most people, oh my God, everything's up in the air. But when you said that checking into foundations, that's very much what Saturn is invested in. Saturn, when I teach about Saturn, I always say Saturn's not trying to make things hard for you, but he's really invested in quality and longevity. He's invested in you protecting and preserving the substantial relationships and the important things, which sometimes could be your health and well-being. Maybe it's your maybe it's your future financial security, which might mean that you can't do this thing now. It might mean, it's family rather than career, and it won't be small topics that you're choosing between, which I think is having such a major card like the tower showing up for August really indicates that, there are big life choices that will affect the course of the next few years. And we're really getting into those in August.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's why I always try and focus on a major card, is because of the big ideas that present themselves over the course of the month. So the card itself says, this is what those big things will be focused on, as opposed to some of the minor cards, which I will look at. I'll look at a series of minor cards for September as well, just to give people a bit of a flavor as to where they're coming from. So I can do that now if you like.
Yeah, well, speaking of September, it appears we have arrived at that portion of the podcast or the show today. So yeah, let's talk about September.
The segue. Well, from the tarot perspective, we have a real change. So we had the Devil and the Tower, and the one thing I didn't point out, they're the only two major arcana cards actually, and I'll just hold up the Devil, that actually have that black background. And there are only 5 cards in the deck that do that, and there are only 2 in the major arcana. So they always present themselves as relatively challenging cards. That is not the case for September. The major arcana card for September is actually the Star, and you can almost see by looking at it that it is a card that presents a much, much more positive, softer image. Now, this is a card of hope and optimism and even intellectual freedom, because it's a card whose correspondence is Aquarius. And it's a chance to really reflect on possibilities, and reflect on possibilities, because then this is a card with some air energy. but also, especially because the two minor arcana cards that are associated with this time of the year, and that's the 9 and the 10 of Pentacles. So I'm going to hold them up as well. 9 of Pentacles, 10 of Pentacles, two beautiful cards that are earth-based. Our Pentacles are earth-based. So this is a time to mentally reflect. We've got that air energy kind of sitting in the star on what we've already done and what the results of what we've already done are. So it's a good time to be aware, especially with that 9 of Pentacles, of the fruits of our labor. A good time to say something like, you know what, hey, I did this. I'm proud of this. This is, and whatever that might be. Project at home, renovation, garden, building project, fixing the car, work, whether it's a major assignment, whether you finished a course, or you finished a degree or diploma or course of study. A star is a head card, though. So hope and optimism. And then we've got the pentacles, which are hand cards. So that's doing things, active. So when we blend those two together, then we see the doing, which is the practical, active, everyday stuff, as the reason for our optimistic nature. So that idea of September, that concept of hope, of optimism coming from the work that we do or the work that we've done or the fruits of our labor is really the opening energy for that month. Does that link to the astrology?
Well, as soon as you said like it's a new cycle, it's a transition, I'm like, well, yes, it is. And it's funny because I know in the tarot there's like that hierarchy of like Major Arcana, Minor Arcana. And of course in astrology we have like more major things and more minor things. And the major thing for the month of September is that we go into eclipse season. Yes, we're back there already. And in fact, the first eclipse in this second eclipse season for 2024 is in the sign of Pisces. It's September 17. It's a full moon or lunar eclipse. And it is the first eclipse on the Pisces Virgo axis, which is it's the cycle we're going to be working with over the next 18 months to 2 years. So the idea here is that we are transitioning with our eclipse cycles. We still have a couple of eclipses in the Aries Libra axis, but we're at that point where we're starting to transition. And so the beginning of like the early subtle kind of emanations or imaginings of what this Pisces Virgo eclipse cycle will be like, which will be the majority of 2025 and a good part of 2026, that begins now, September. And so that is an important shift from that longer eclipse cycle time point. Now, eclipses in Pisces, this is a lunar eclipse. The moon is going to be between Saturn and Neptune on the day of the eclipse. There's a lot of feeling. There's a lot of sensitivity. There may not be a lot of clarity. So we're going to be like really deep in that emotional place and trying to find information that helps us understand the feelings or the sensations that we're processing. So that's kind of the big theme for September. And then at the more kind of what are the quicker moving planets, which could be maybe akin to the Minor Arcana, what are they doing this month? We actually have a little bit of a constructive combination where we have Venus in Libra, one of her home signs, which is definitely a head, but also relational placement because Libra is an air sign. And we're going to have Mercury come back into Virgo, where it's going to spend, a good portion of the month. And that is an earth sign. And Mercury in Virgo, there is an analytical component, but there is also this sort of practical organizational component, sort of technical skill, artisan kind of skill piece. And so just thinking about what you're talking about in terms of like the star card versus the 9 and 10 of Pentacles, that elemental combination of air and earth is showing up a little bit astrologically. Of course, most of September is the sun in Virgo, and then we have the sun in Libra, which are earth and air signs anyway. But Mercury and Venus are kind of co-signing on that this September. I was going to say this Virgo, which is an astrologer problem, this September. But, the big event that really stood out to me is that we're starting an eclipse season. So that tells us first eclipse is September 7, and about 2 weeks later in early October, we'll have the second eclipse, which will be in Libra. And eclipse season is always a time where energy is a little unstable. Normal rhythms and routines can be disrupted, but that also means that there are these portals or windows of opportunity to tap into things that may normally not be options. But like around the eclipses, you can get to things or make connections that normally you can't. And so I think that adds a little bit of a different quality of energy to September. So interesting to hear you talking about even having the star card come up, because I don't know, I always think that's just such a beautiful card in the tarot.
Yeah, it absolutely is. It is a beautiful card. I mean, there are many cards that are beautiful. We talked about the Tower card, and you would know I actually have a T-shirt that has the Tower card on it, because I believe there are times that where every card is a needed card. But yeah, interesting about the elemental links, about that idea of air and earth coming from both cards, and not coming from both cards, but coming from the blend of the cards from the Minor Arcana,
Mm,
connected to the card of the Major Arcana as well. So that people understand that although the minor cards are always associated with the same period of the zodiac, so they're linked to the decanic sections of each sign. The majors are not. The majors are often, we talk about a card of the year, like this year, 2024 is the year of strength. But that will change in 2025 and change in 2026 because of the numerological way we go about that. So it's not like July, August, and September will always be the devil, the tower, and the star. So it really is kind of interesting how that works.
Sorry, I muted myself to sneeze and forgot to unmute. So yeah, that's a really good reminder that the cards you're picking are sort of tied to the numbers of the year. Because well, not similarly, but in astrology, the energies that we're having, the Mars-Uranus combination, for instance, in July, that only happens every couple of years, and it's only the third time it's happening in Taurus. And the next time it happens a couple of years from now, it'll be in a totally different sign.
Yeah.
So there really is a bit of a unique combination. And it's so interesting how significant July and August look, both astrologically and from the perspective of tarot. So yeah, these are months that matter, I think, as a way to describe it. Okay, Peter, this was so good. Thank you so much for sharing
Well,
your tarot insight. Where can people find out more about what you're offering? And do you want to let people know about any classes or consults that you have available?
sure. So the best way to find out what's going on is in two spots. So I would always direct people to my website, which is peterwhitetarot.com, or my socials on Instagram or Facebook at the same space, peterwhitetarot.com. The one thing that I've got going on, actually, I'm quite excited about, is a podcast. So myself and a colleague of mine have launched a tarot podcast called the Tarot Table with Bonnie and Peter. Right now, we're on Spotify and on YouTube. I'll make sure to include the links for those who are interested in the show notes. And the podcast kind of geared towards, I'll say, those who have an interest in tarot, but might have little knowledge. Although we hope that it also contains some nuggets for those who are more advanced. So we discuss everything from challenging cards, for example. One of our most recent episodes, we talked about the Tower and we talked about the Devil card. We talk about favorite spreads. We've talked about how to buy your first deck and how to maintain a tarot deck. We've got an episode on how to incorporate the Hellenistic elements of earth, air, fire, and water into the tarot. So if that sounds like something you enjoy, then as we state at every episode, grab your deck of cards, grab your favorite beverage, and join us around the tarot table. I will make sure to include how you can do that in the notes.
Excellent.
How about you,
Fantastic.
Cal?
And what was your website, Peter? Again, just
So
for people.
peterwhitetarot.com.
Perfect. Yes. So for me, if you want more weekly astrology insights, if you want tips on all the other aspects that are happening throughout July and August and September, you can join my astrology guide membership. You can find out the details about that at kellysastrology.com. If you sign up before July 13, so you have to kind of run, not walk, if you're listening to this video early, you can save 15% off your membership fee using the code ENERGY15. And we'll put the link where you can go to use that code in the show notes below. And of course, any other astrology training or courses that you're looking for, you can find out details on what I have going on over at kellysastrology.com. I think that's it from both of us for this quarter. Thanks again, Peter, for joining me for this. We wish you all the very best, and we'll see you again in a few months' time. Thanks,
Bye-bye.
Peter.
Thanks.